Views, and comments expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the management, ownership, or production of Glory 93.9 FM.
Today can be the turning point in your life by making a simple decision.
Fundamental questions of navigation. Where am I? Where am I going? And how do I get there from here?
I invite the leaders of our planet to ask themselves these three questions before they make any crucial decisions.
But if you don't make decisions, you're going to stay right where you are.
We are all map makers.
We are in a time of transition.
If we're going to change, we have to change the direction that we're going.
Our planet needs leaders who know where they want to go.
When we change the direction we're going, then we want to make sure we're going in the right direction.
Leaders who can see the big picture.
Because if we're not, we're going to either go backwards or we're going to stay where we are.
Recognizing the psychological and the spiritual shifts and changes that need to be made, often from the inside to the outside.
To be able to shape your future, you have to be willing and able to change your paradigm.
Complex journeys require navigation. The path to the truth is one such journey. This is your GPS. Hairstyling services provided by J.D. Edwards Salon and Spa, Palmdale Shopping Plaza, Madera Street.
Accessories provided by Chevette Williamson Jewelry. Standout jewelry for standout women.
Wardrobe provided by Bahari Bahamas. Visit shopbahari.com. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. I am your host, Michelle Malcolm, and as always, it is a pleasure to be in your company today. Thank you so much for joining us once again. I really do appreciate all of you tuning in every day. So my guest is a little lost. Y'all give me a second. There's him messaging. Let me just let him know. Look for the building with the high tower on top of it. So he told me that driving in Nassau for him is like driving through Afghanistan. People don't let him drive because he always just get lost. I send him on very clear directions. Easy to follow directions. But clearly he don't know his way around. So he's somewhere in the neighborhood, y'all. I hope he I hope he finds it quickly. And this guest is a gentleman who I have the highest respect for. He is an economist, and he is brilliant when it comes to ideas about how the Bahamas can advance economically. And he's no stranger to those of you who are persons who have listened to my shows, whether it be here or at the other place. Now, I think this is his first time appearing on my show since I've been here, I think. Yeah, I don't think I've had him on since. Anyway, my guest today is Professor Dr. Gilbert Morris. And as good as he is at numbers, he's not so good at following directions. We all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. So now I know one of his weaknesses is navigation as it relates to following directions. So I hope he's outside somewhere. Yeah, hopefully he'll be walking into the studio any minute now. But we're going to be talking about. I'm treating the show as a continuation of the series that I've been doing on taxation. But this one is not so much relative to taxation of individuals in the country as it is about the nation and our ability to stand on our own or inability to stand on our own when it comes to global forces and their demands as it relates to our tax structure. So I'm calling this show today. We're going to be going into an explanation today about the global minimum corporate tax. Now, this is important because you all know that financial services is a major aspect of what we do in the Bahamas as it relates to. You found it? Somebody walking. Ah, Dr. Morris found the studio. Y'all, he found the studio. Good to see you again. I just said on the air, he's very good at numbers, but not so much as navigation. I just need you to put on the headphones there for me, please, and welcome
morning,
to
good
GPS.
morning,
It's
good
good to
morning.
see you.
I love Nassau, but Maurice Clinton calls me all the time and he says, Gilbert, I sent the immigration for you and you are ducking. You're not from Nassau, right? You're in a foreign country without the proper rights and papers.
Listen, I send this man very good directions.
Yeah.
Very, very good directions.
Now, women always say things like that.
Let me put it this way. Ain't none of my other guests had no problem fighting the studio.
Well, they're very tall, which means that they're abnormal, right?
Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you found us.
Absolutely.
So glad.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
So we're talking today about this move, this push for a global minimum corporate tax. And for those of you who are not familiar about what that is and what that will look like, here's a clip that will explain to you what this tax is all about. Do we have it? We don't have it? Oh, it's uploading now? Okay. All right. So it's ready to go. Okay, let's see that clip.
We're working with G20 nations to agree to a global minimum corporate tax rate.
Money has long been lost to tax shelters and havens, but that could be set to change.
Another consequence of an interconnected world has been a 30-year race to the bottom on corporate tax rates.
The US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said she is working with G20 countries to create a global corporate minimum tax. So what is it, and why introduce the measure?
Together, we can use a global minimum tax to make sure the global economy thrives based on a more level playing field.
Multinational companies often shift profits to low-tax countries, regardless of where their sales are made. It's why the likes of Apple are headquartered in Ireland. It allows companies to avoid paying higher tax than in their home countries, and means governments often have to lower their taxes to lure foreign investment. With the new rules, the Biden administration is hoping to reduce tax base erosion without putting American firms at a financial disadvantage.
President Biden's proposals announced last week call for bold domestic action, including to raise the U.S. minimum tax rate and renewed international engagement, recognizing that it's important to work with other countries to end the pressures of tax competition and corporate tax base erosion.
Under the proposal, governments could still set their own local corporate tax rates, but if companies pay lower rates abroad, their home governments could top up their taxes, bringing them in line with the global minimum rate. Negotiations have been happening for years among 140 countries at the Paris-based Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
On the necessity of having a new international taxation system.
The OECD said governments are in broad agreement with the principle, but the thorniest issue is said to be the rate itself, which is yet to be established. Even just within the European Union, corporate tax rates vary among its 27 members, from 9% in Hungary to 32% in France. The EU's attempts to unify what companies are taxed on have even been stalled since 2011. Taxation is a jealously guarded prerogative of national parliaments and often forms a key part of a country's economic model.
The idea is here you have 51 or 52 corporations. of a Fortune 500 haven't paid a single penny in tax for 3 years? Come on, man.
Biden's administration has proposed a global minimum of 21%. That's far above previous discussions, which circled around 12.5%, a level that happens to match Ireland's. The Irish economy has boomed in recent years, fueled by the influx of billions of dollars of investment from foreign multinationals. That means Dublin is unlikely to accept a higher rate without a fight.
So I think that report did a pretty good job of explaining what the global minimum corporate tax is. But from a Bahamian perspective, why is this, Professor Morris, something that we ought to really be concerned about?
I've been working in this area and talking about this for 25 years. I taught global taxation, the global financial system, and the law of war, which is very much like global finance when you think about the coordinating and aligning propositions of war, rival risk, and in-group, out-group structures that lead to it. What you heard in the report that was just given sounds very nice. 99% of it is false. And when I say it's false, I don't mean that there's a conspiracy or anything. Nothing that you're going to sit there and say it's an abject lie. Not like that. But it's framing. It's not an expression of the facts. It's framing. The OECD in 1998 blacklisted a group of mostly post-colonial countries. Small countries. The United States has 7 financial centers. The largest tax havens in the world are islands. They are Britain and Manhattan. China has 3 financial centers, but none of them have come under any form of blacklisting. The Netherlands is currently the most prolific tax haven in the world. And you would know that Danske Bank and Deutsche Bank have been found guilty. I mean, Danske Bank is one of the biggest money laundering scandals in history. Deutsche Bank has been fined in the last 5 years, the equivalent of the GDP of the entire CARICOM 10 times over. And Germany has not been blacklisted. Christine Lagarde, who is head of the ECB, 2 weeks before she was confirmed as head of the European Central Bank, was found guilty in a French court of a $400 million money laundering scheme. And yet 2 weeks later, by these same people who pushed the OECD agenda, she was appointed by acclamation as ECB chief, head of the European Central Bank. So what we are facing here is not in the Caribbean, because we lack knowledge about these things, and because the young people used to say in my day, you like priests up in other people's things. And because we take prestige from proximity, flying over to any one of these large countries, being feted by them, and then standing in a nice line, taking a photograph with our hanky. We get up a DM stop at Walmart, and we think we've achieved something. So the problem here is that we have a tendency not to be prepared, not to live in a world in which we are a diminished or small power. And therefore we have to be, what is that? I can never remember whether it's a gospel song or actually the Bible that says, in cunning craftiness, right? So I've always taken that phrase to mean that we have to be innovative, and we have to be cleverer, and we have to be masterful in the way we do things. So instead of doing that, we waste time beating each other up on 2 tribal propositions of PLP and F&M, when in fact the country needs thinking people who are looking at what's happening around the globe and who begin to map out, game out, and strategize and build scenarios around options for the Bahamas. Well, we haven't done that. Sir Stafford Sands had an intuition about financial services. We have not developed beyond that intuition. And so we are faced with this situation that the United States has given out the stimulus. President Trump did a massive tax cut, and now they've given out about $6 trillion when you combine all the initiatives, the first one and the second one. Now they have to pay for it. So their view is, we are going to charge individuals earning over $400,000 and corporations a higher tax to pay for all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And wealthy people have already gotten the benefit in the Trump tax cut. So they're saying, okay, if we tax these wealthy people, so much for patriotism. Those wealthy people are going to move, their companies, or they're going to move themselves out of the country and so on, or they're going to go to Caribbean countries and set up corporate structures where they disappear behind the corporate structure or the trust, and we won't be able to tax them.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to tax, what is the United States doing? What is Janet Yellen saying? She's saying what the small countries were saying 15 years ago. Let's have a level playing field.
Mm-hmm.
What the law presumes, let's have a level playing field. What the UN Declaration presumes, let's have a level playing field. Right? What the European Declaration of Human Rights presumes, let's have a level playing field. What the Vienna Convention on Treaties presumes, let's have a level playing field. They rejected all those arguments in 2007, 2009, 2011. You'll do what we say.
Mm-hmm.
Now that they're in the lurch, they use this language and they say it's the G20. But guess what? You can't make Turkey, you can't make China, you can't make Russia, you can't make any of these countries pay a global minimum corporate tax. So what's going to happen is they're going to impose it on smaller countries, because smaller countries have no innovative or intellectual insight into these things, and we have no foreign policy, we have no strategy, we have no access. We are going to capitulate to it and say it's international, it's high standards, and we'll produce brochures and print announcing to everyone that we're in compliance and
Mm-hmm.
that, this is how we function and this is a sign of our legitimacy and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact, that's not the case. Now, I don't mind that. Paul Moss has argued for a corporate tax from the day I met him. Right.
Okay.
And Paul, that's frothy. That's not a soft argument,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's believed that it's unfair for these companies to pay up to 32 or 37% in their own countries and pay zero in the Bahamas.
Right.
That has been his view.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the problem. We could have a lovely aesthetic argument about structures and competition and so on that front. Where it becomes a problem is when these rules, these external rules, impact the ordinary Bahamian.
Yeah, and that's what I want to touch on today. We have to talk about that because we have to bring this conversation to the point where the ordinary Bahamian understands that this is not just some highfalutin conversation that's not going to touch us, but you will be affected as well by this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I definitely want to talk about how the ordinary Bahamian will be impacted by this. Clearly, you believe, and many would not disagree with you, that a part of our problem is, as you so eloquently stated a moment ago, a lack of visionary planning. And so many of our leaders, I believe, I shouldn't say many, but some of our leaders, I believe, think that, this is too big for us to stand up against, to stand alone.
Right.
We don't have a choice but to acquiesce.
Right.
But you don't believe that is the case.
I don't believe that is the case because, it's very funny. I saw someone, a government official this morning, talking about the earmark for the land for the young professionals. And I was saying that's unconstitutional.
Right.
But because we don't understand constitutions and we read it like a stop sign, it just bluntly says stop and we think that's what it means. We don't understand that constitutions are about rights, privileges, benefits, and powers. And you can't get, so they say, well, you could get driver's license on age discrimination. That's not age discrimination. That's called a conditionality. But driver's license are not a national benefit, right? It's a privilege. when you're giving away crown land, that's a national benefit. You can't give a national benefit on the basis of age. It's just that simple. Doesn't mean that your plan is wicked or nefarious, or it's just inconsistent.
Right.
So it's the same thing when we look at financial services. We were unprepared. We thought we could manage, $1 trillion in funds coming into our country, and we never had to look up and learn the global financial system and learn the foreign policy. And remember this, financial services is a foreign policy proposition, not a Ministry of Finance proposition and so on.
Okay.
We didn't organize ourselves well. And so what happened is when the rules change, we changed the rules for the ordinary Bahamian too. Why did that happen? It happened for the reason I said before. We are lazy. So Sir Stafford Sands came up with an idea. We think we could run that idea for the next millennia without ever examining it, without ever understanding what it's doing, without understanding its impact, without having a research group that looks at the social safety net in Europe and the increased cost to them, without looking at the aging populations in 9 of the G20 countries, over 17%, which economists regard as catastrophic. And therefore, they would have an incentive to come after us and to build a set of arguments. But when they came, they met an open door. They didn't meet a series of legal arguments and international law studies and so on, which buttressed our position. And what would have been the key thing for that? The key thing would have been to actually have a financial center. And this is the problem. The Bahamas is not a financial center. It's a jurisdiction that offers an a la carte menu of financial services, none of which we can protect, none of which we are the originators of, none of which we are the masters of on the world scene, none of which we have deep intellectual understandings of as it relates to the global financial system. So because we don't have a financial center, when these rules come down from the OECD and the FATF, they apply to the entire Bahamas, not to the financial center. We have nothing to negotiate to say these rules that you're talking about. Our local banks, our people, in Turks and Caicos, when you were a child, if your father's name was Joseph and your mommy names you Sydney, when you went to the commissioner, he said, boy, your name is Joseph Jr. Who got any name like Sydney? So he just put your name down for your passport. Like, your birth certificate has got one name, your passport has got another. That was a running joke for many years. And I think that's true throughout the Caribbean, right? In various ways. That became almost like a crime once we allowed the OECD's rules to take root in the Bahamas. I can't tell you how many people, a senior lawyer in Turks and Caicos stopped, in Miami International Airport when they tell you, come with us in the little room with the broken fan and so on. And they ask you your name 37 times and that sort of thing. And you think you're headed to Guantanamo Bay. This happens because instead of paying attention to our culture and building rules up from the culture, which recognizes our unique situation. I have granddaunts. I'm, a leader in my family. I have granddaunts and people like that. Some people for whom I kept bank accounts. I got their pension. I got this. I got that. So all of a sudden, these rules and the suspicion of these movements, now you had to give an account for so many of these things. And my point is, people say, well, the world is changing and you got to move with it. That is abject nonsense. The problem is not that the world is changing. The problem is we don't have a strategy or a vision of ourselves. And when these rules come down, instead of having and this is a factual thing. If you have a financial center, which is essentially a free trade zone, so if we understood what that meant, we would never call our ministers of the Bahamas International Financial Center the ministers of financial services. The minister can't be a minister of financial services, right? Because particular services don't come before that minister. What matters is whether the overall legal structure and the trade proposition between the Bahamas and the world is valid. I took one last point. I took the Honorable Floyd Hall on a mission, an official mission to Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, Wall Street, a couple of other places. So I said to him in the document, I said, our goal is to come back with 5,000 companies.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, is that how it's done? I go, yeah, companies are traded in blocks. Like you go to a country, they may have a system where, there's investors are paying, $1,000, $1,500 a year for companies. You offer $600 and you work with law firms and so on, and you get those companies moved out of that jurisdiction to yours. This has happened in Haiti. I've done this in Dominican Republic. I've done it in Hong Kong. I've done it, all over the place. You come back with the structures are how you get the business. So structures and people with unique talents, and then your people well trained up to be able to support those talents and eventually rise to the top level. But you need a financial center, a designated area that is your financial center, where when the OECD does something or issues a directive, it applies just to that zone, not to your entire country. Because you're changing the rules for grannies who have no contact with the international financial centers or the international global rules on financial transactions.
Wow. Okay, we're going. That's heavy. We're on the other side of the break. We're going to look at what that looks like for Granny,
right,
if that happens, and then we're also going to talk a little later on in the show as to how do you go about establishing a financial center as described by Professor Morris. So yeah, this is not a conversation only about, what's happening around the world, but this will definitely impact us.
Absolutely.
We definitely have to pay attention.
It already has.
Yeah. All right. So stay with us. We're going to be talking more on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
Located on Carmichael Road, Divine Designs Hair Boutique is a haven for women and men looking for professional beauty services. Our state-of-the-art and contemporary equipment creates a relaxing ambiance for you to enjoy while we cater to you. Need a hairstylist? We cater to all types and textures of hair for care and styling. We even have a barber on duty. Need a nail tech? Our technicians provide a range of nail services, including the latest trends. Unwind in one of our massage chairs while you get your pedicure. With our reasonable rates, friendly staff, and over 20 years of experience, you will be in great hands. Call us at 823-1669 or 698-1025 to schedule your appointment. Want to be pampered? Want to be slayed? Let Divine Designs make your day.
Boy, here calamity. Boy, don't want that be me. Let me get this coverage, do it once and for all. Insurance management is who I gonna call.
When calamity strikes, we're here to keep you safe and secure. With offices in Nassau, Freeport, Abacoy, Luther, and Exuma. Insurance management, we cover the Bahamas.
At Lee Air, safety is our #1 priority. Flying since 1996, we offer scheduled flights into Fresh Creek and Mangrove Key Andros and Great Harbor Key, Berry Island, twice daily, 7 days a week. Affordable charter services are also available to anywhere in the Bahamas and the Caribbean. Lee Air Charter Services. Call 225-3267, 702-7127, or 322-1317 for reservations.
For moms-to-be and your little ones, there's Baby Bliss, the baby shower specialist, with the best selection of shower gifts, care items, and gender reveal rentals. At Baby Bliss, we carry only the finest brands to comfort mother and baby. From preemie to 24 months, we are truly the ultimate baby store. Mimi is a new tradition in ladies' apparel, featuring fabulous fashions, sizes small to 3X. Look like you just stepped off the runway with trending, stylish selections that bring out the fashionista in you. Making a statement is easy when you shop at Mimi. Visit us both at the Mackey Street Plaza.
To stay healthy, it's crucial to make sure you get the nutrition you need every day. But it's difficult to get all your recommended vitamins and minerals from food alone. Even in the United States, 94% of people are deficient in at least one nutrient. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 by Longevity is a simple, convenient, and affordable way to help your body get the essential nutrients it needs. It's an advanced plant-driven multivitamin mineral complex that contains certified organic whole foods, trace minerals, and antioxidants. BTT 2.0 supports your body's natural defense system with a proprietary blend of energy-boosting and body-loving nutrients, plus prebiotics, probiotics, amino acids, and enzymes that support digestion. With an unusually high ORAC score of 8,000, you get even more antioxidants to help combat free radicals that can cause damage to your cells. But to get the most benefit and value from any multivitamin, your body must be able to break down the nutrients so you can fully absorb them. Otherwise, they'll just pass through your system without doing any good. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 was specially formulated with synergizing cofactors to ensure you get maximum nutrient absorption. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 is the easiest way to give your body the balance and complete daily vitamin mineral supplement it needs for optimal support of your overall health. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
And we are back. Welcome back to GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. I'm your host, Michelle Malcolm. And my guest today is the one, the only Professor Dr. Gilbert Morris, who it's always a pleasure to have him on the set. So I want to read a couple of the comments, and then we're going to go back to the discussion. We have some comments coming in on Facebook, and Adrian says, great show today, watching from Switzerland. Welcome all the way from Switzerland, Adrian.
Yes.
Graham says, smart man. Yeah, Graham. That's Graham Weatherford.
I love Graham.
And then Bertha says, Professor Morris is someone when he speaks, you just can't help but listen. Great show as usual, Michelle. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. All right. So we are talking today about the global minimum corporate tax,
Right.
which is now being pushed by the United States and countries in Europe. And the question is, how is this going to impact us, or how is it already impacting us here in the Bahamas? And do we have the testicular fortitude as a nation to stand up and say, no, we're not going to be a part of this?
Right.
So Dr. Morris has some very interesting views on the matter. And he's here with us today to talk about this and figure out, what can we do realistically if we decide to go against this, to stand up and say no. But the question is, do we have leaders that have the testicular fortitude to stand up and say no? Or, as we talked about during the break, are we just saddled with leaders who are content to, as you put it, Dr. Morris, give excuses for failure as opposed to looking at how we can stand on our own? What are your views on that?
Well, this is the excuses for failure thing touches me very, very deeply. And I was speaking to an erstwhile minister, no name shall be called, to protect the vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was saying to him that, it strikes me very funnily that when you were in opposition, you said everything that I said. You would write to me, ask me for ideas to review things and so on. And many of them in both parties have done that. But when they come into government,
something switches.
They repeat the same excuses that the previous government, in the same language, the same words, without any sense of cognitive dissonance, without any fear of appearing schizophrenic, right? And it is a shocking thing to observe. The person, and you have his texts and emails and so on, and you say, but my friend, I'm actually quoting you, right? I'm actually quoting you. And this shows that we don't have governments, and not just one party, because there's no party, there's only one party. They're all partners and friends and lovers and all this sorts of things, brothers and sisters and so on. But when it comes to the issue of global finance and how this thing is going to work, so the G20, remember how this works. The OECD has been seeking this global tax for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
One of my colleagues, Thomas Piketty, who is a French professor at who's a French fellow, who's a professor at Stanford, an economics professor at Stanford, wrote 2 major books, all right? One is called, the latest is called Capital and Ideology, which I'm reviewing for the University Bookman. And in that book, he called for a global tax. Gabriel Zucman, who is his understudy, wrote a book calling for a global corporate tax. But when you look in the book, right, and I wrote to Gabriel about this and to Cornell University Press about this, the publisher of the book, not one reference to a G20 country. All of the references are to small countries.
Who they can bully.
That's right. The international consortia of journalists that goes around hacking into law firms in the Caribbean and hacking. So they hack to get the Panama Papers. They hack to get the Bahamas Papers. They hack Appleby and Sterling in Bermuda. And then I went to Bermuda and challenged the AG to charge them. But they didn't charge them criminally. They filed a civil suit against them, and then it was settled out of court, which was very devastating to me. After all, I was trained in this by Maurice Clinton, right? So the interesting thing that has happened is these large countries. This was proposed to them before, and if you'll remember, I'll put it another way. There's a trend and a push from the OECD, from the FATF, from the G20 to lock down small developing nations, all right, where their people may go to. So an American looking at their tax model says, or a European, you're taxing me. We don't have good roads. We don't have good infrastructure. We don't have these things. I'm moving my headquarters to Ireland or the Bahamas. They don't want that to happen. They're not going to change their policies that make people move, which is really what's tax competition. If you look at all the classic texts in economics, it's supposed to force the government seeking taxes to be more efficient.
Okay.
They don't want to be any more efficient. Every time the farmers march the cows down the Champs-Élysées, the French give them what they want. And instead of negotiating with them, they say, how can I get this money from Cayman or Bahamas or, some other country? How can we blame them? So it's the typical divide and conquer game, all right, substitution game. Now, that's how the game is played. That's how the global game is played. You can't whine about that. That's how it's played. We are not playing the game. That's the problem. Playing the game is having a vision of yourself, a strategy, understanding what's going on, not merely following Sir Stafford Sand's intuition, and developing and having 100 students at UOB who are researchers on the Bahamas International Financial Center and having a deputy foreign minister for financial services, for the financial center, and a deputy attorney general for the financial center, because these are legal and foreign policy constructs. And if you don't have one, when they make these rules, it's going to apply to Granny in Inagua. And it shouldn't, because she has nothing to do with that. So what we're doing is we're importing these rules. We have a set of companies called IBCs. They're international business companies. Those companies are barred from doing business in the Bahamas. So in those companies, you already have the structure of a financial center because you have a set of companies that cannot do business in the Bahamas.
Okay.
A financial center zone means that everybody in that zone is in an international space or free trade zone space. They don't do business in the Bahamas. So when the rules come down to address those people, the rules should only apply to them, not to the entire Bahamas. If you go to the United States, I can open a bank account. I give them my whatever ID I have, and it takes half an hour. Banks in the Bahamas have to hire an entire staff, and it takes weeks. And even if you get everything right, they come back and they say, well, just to be on the safe side, add this, add that, or your last utility bill, this thing it's dated too long. We need a new one. 3 months. It once was 6 months, then it's 3 months, and so on. Different countries have different rules. But my point is, Bahamians who have nothing to do with international finance, who have a constitutional right to live in their country according to the culture that has grown up in their country and have their money-related habits regulated on the basis of their actions, are having to change their money-related habits in their own countries, in their own country, based on the actions of people to whom they have no connection.
That's absolutely madness. Okay, we have a caller on the line. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, welcome to GPS.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to everyone. I think you have an excellent guest on, and he's actually speaking truth. You know, it is just very, very sad in our country what we've come to, because economically, we really should be the envy of the world. We have a banking system that is not for the people. And his scenario that he just described, whereby you can open an account in the States in half an hour, is correct. When you come here, you have so many bottlenecks just to open an account in your own country. And oftentimes we wonder, you know, what are we here for? Why, you know, every single day citizens wonder, is your life getting better? Is your life getting better, or is it getting worse? And, you know, we need to just fix this, Bahamas. And I think, Michelle Markham, you're doing an amazing job with your guests, because you're actually hitting home with facts. You want information to get to the people so they realize that the power is in their hands. Every voter has a right to vote for a better life. And we find that people are voting for just a party or a color, and they don't have the facts about what they should be voting for. So economically, I think, you know, I'm going back and forth, but I just feel that, you know, in this country, if we don't take a stand now and change what we have for the better, we are all doomed. Like I say, the power is in the hands of the people. And we need people like Mr. Morris and others to join forces to take this country to the next level where it should have been decades ago. And I think that now is the time, and I do believe that there will be an incremental change coming very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
calling.
you, madam.
Very powerful statements there by the caller. How do you respond to her, Professor Morris?
I think she's absolutely right. I love her passion and, you know, the way she articulates this deep yearning to live in a Bahamas that reflects the values of her, you know, herself, her community, and so on. And this is the thing that I find amazing. We seem to have this view. I'll give you a simple phrase just to give you an example of what bothers me. So we'll say when the U.S. sneezes, the Bahamas catches cold. And then we just giggle and laugh and go on to another subject. But to an innovator, to a strategist, to a visionary, when you say that, you say, how can I arrange a situation where when they sneeze, we don't catch a cold? You know, we are, in fact, we have the antidote. That means, and you may never get there, but the fact that you think in that way and in that trajectory means that, in fact, you will be more efficient than you would be if you just treated it as a joke. Small nations, island nations, have to be quick on their feet. Metternich, the prime minister of Austria from 1808 to 1848, who kept the peace in Europe and was the smallest country in Austria, but controlled the 5 largest countries in Austria through strategy. So much so that every diplomat in every generation lights votive candles to Metternich, because it was a tiny country controlling large countries that led to the first treaty of Versailles. And Metternich, the tiniest country in Europe, Austria, is the one who drafted that Treaty of Versailles because nobody trusted anybody else but him. But that was because he demonstrated the intellectual prowess to understand the larger country issues and define them against each other and put Austria in the leadership role. And I wrote a book about this, and I keep talking about it because I say, when you talk to our politicians, they say another phrase, we had a gun to our head. What does that mean? Does that mean that the OECD tells you that you have to get rid of certain laws in the Bahamas, but you want to continue to hold yourself as the rightful lawmaker, all right? and you want to put people in prison because of our laws. You want to put people, our constitution. You want to put people, allow people to get married because of our constitution. You want to allocate resources according to our constitution. But when the OECD bangs the table, you run back to the Bahamas and change the laws and implement unconstitutional laws, the very constitution which is the source of your power. And you say, but Morris, it's hard. Yeah, that's why we give you titles, pretty cars, and stand when you come into the room.
If you can't handle it, get out of the kitchen.
Get out of the kitchen. It's hard. Running an island state is hard in a globalized world.
Mm-hmm.
We expect you to be smart about it, and we don't expect you to have the answers. The answers are walking around in the streets of the Bahamas by people who are not part of the cronyocratic cabal, people who are not part of the two tribes, young, brilliant people who've been spat out by the system because they're not prepared to conform in the way that you would like to keep the system going. If the country was open, influential, allowing young people to be influential. So this is the troika. So there's influence, confluence, and refluence. If they are influential, meaning that this intelligence comes from the ground up, from young people and so on, and there's a confluence of Bahamian thinking, international thinking, and leadership by the government, then this becomes refluential, meaning it rains out over the country and changes the culture and lifts the culture up to where it's supposed to be in juxtaposition to its potential. And if we're not doing that, so that's the larger theoretical evangelical point. The practical point is we ought to have had a defined financial center zone that's an international free trade zone in financial services. We already have an IBC which prevents those companies from doing business domestically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why, when the OECD imposes rules on them, should it affect someone in Eleuthera or Grand Bahama who's not involved in this zone, a Bahamian who's just living his or her life in their country under the Constitution? And this is an absolutely incredible problem. But here's the thing, as I said before, when we look at things like people, I see people constantly saying, oh, I went to this bank and that bank and I was treated badly and they're charging me fees and bad things are going on. And so it's actually worse than that. We are down to essentially two correspondent banks.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of your listeners who don't know, when you do international transactions, there are clearing banks. There are banks in the United States for us that clear our transactions. And then, so if you wire money to Turks and Caicos, sometimes if you wire money in the Bahamas, it goes to New York and then comes back down,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So what that is these are clearing banks. We are down to two. Those banks have no reason to keep us as customers because we don't make enough money for them. JP Morgan is a $3 trillion bank. Let's imagine that our full transactions, let's be ridiculous, let's say it's $3 billion.
Mm-hmm.
That's their garden party budget,
Oh my God.
right? So, and they're getting a lot of grief, right, from American regulators about things going on. That's why the Canadian banks have found us inconvenient, because the Americans have put pressure on them after, I think it's 2012, when they had that big scandal. And some of the reports that went out when the Canadian banks came in and made all the drastic changes to the way they manage, right? The Americans have been putting pressure on them that, hey, if you let some of these transactions through and you have this record, we are going to hammer you, because America and Canada data share, right? They have a data sharing platform.
Mm-hmm.
So pressure is being put on the Canadian banks. They're asking themselves, why should we go through all of this? You know, okay, we were making money, but now it's become inconvenient. So that's the position we're in. So when people, so here we are, you'll hear lots of speeches about Bahamian financial services professionals or bankers talking about de-risking. This is the wrong word. That's their word for us.
Mm.
That's their word for us.
Mm-hmm.
What they are engaged in is regulatory arbitrage that prejudices small countries that don't have the transactional volume to make us relevant for them. That's the real definition of what's going on. And that means that people in Paris are going to make tax policy for people in the Bahamas.
We actually have a caller on the line, so let's go straight to the phone lines. Caller, welcome to GPS.
Yes, good morning to you, Miss Michelle Malcolm, and to Dr. Morris.
Good morning, my
Good morning.
dear.
My name is Berenice Johnson, the original, and let me say good morning to my mortal boss, former Prime Minister Hubert Alexander Ingram. Miraculous God's leader's leader. Mr. Morris,
Yes,
sir.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, you dub yourself the Henry Kissinger. That would have been in the Richard Nixon era.
I
As
did.
the Secretary,
I don't.
Secretary of State
I don't
in
dub my.
negotiations.
I don't dub myself that at all. I never said that. I think Lester Cox said that, not me.
Okay, I was listening to a show and I said, okay, because I was going to put a couple of questions to you. However, here in the Bahamas, are you familiar with the situation now, the crisis? What is at hand? Because my question would be, I am very familiar with what is happening. And you reference the Turks and Caicos.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Turks and Caicos is enjoying privileges that ought to have been here in the Bahamas. Now, we know how it got there through expatriates.
Yes, ma'am.
My question to you, sir, is how would you, Dr. Morris, cause all dwelling homes to have access to the basic necessities, to return dignity, because we have our middle class now living and working as the working poor, paycheck to paycheck.
Yes,
and also, that's the first question, and I'm going to hang up and just listen. And also, the reason why corporate taxes is to be placed, you said globally.
Yes.
Would that cause impose donations, because you have people who impose upon businesses that they must donate. I do believe that donations, I'm not answering the question, but I do believe that those who are imposing donations to various functions and personalities
Yes, ma'am.
would cut out.
Yes,
because
ma'am.
you cannot balance it. I'll hang up and listen to you, sir.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
calling.
Bye.
Thank you very much. On the first question about Bahamians living paycheck to paycheck, please, on a Lester Cox show maybe 2.5 years ago, I suggested that if the Bahamas was being run according to its potential, the GDP per capita would be $100,000 a year. That's what Bahamians. That would be the average income for Bahamians. We'd have a $50 billion GDP.
Mm-hmm.
That's one. Number two, and in that same vein, as a solution to this crisis, I proposed this long ago, but as a solution to the current crisis, I had recommended in January 2020 that the government borrow $300 to $500 million and finance the development of 100 to 300 small 10-room boutique hotels owned by Bahamians. And the reason why that would work is because there was pent-up demand, and still is, in the United States for authentic and original Caribbean experience, Bahamian experience. That's one. Number two, it would mean that you'd have these unique hotels. If I was born in Abaco, somebody else is born in Andros, somebody else is born in Eleuthera, those hotels would have unique images and cultural flourishes depending on those environments. I mean, you'd have a more authentic experience. People would have, different coconut cakes and coconut tart and coconut this and that and so on. So even the food culture would be localized and different. Mm-hmm. This would mean investing in and through Bahamians. As a condition for that, you would have those Bahamians settle the sales of their rooms in the Bahamas, which means it would be good for the reserve, because those are US dollars that are paid for hotel rooms currently. They don't come to the Bahamas. But you could make that a condition and set up a mechanism for that to be the case if these hotels are owned by Bahamians, and Bahamians are benefiting, again, from a largesse of the Bahamian people, meaning the loans to help them get established and so on. Mm-hmm. So until we do that, and we learn that the FDI, foreign direct investment, where we try to trade foreign investment for jobs, that model is dead, and that competition between countries and automation is going to mean, even if you get a deal for a job in Dubai, there's a employee-less hotel, a hotel with no staff, all electronic. That's coming. And if we sign up with hotels to develop in this country in exchange for jobs, and then they switch to having no labor, all digital, are we going to throw them out of the country? So we can't build that future. I prefer Bahamians to own the contactless, laborless hotel, and that wealth to be in the Bahamas and attaching to the reserves. So I could go deeper into that, but I won't go. Then on the corporate tax, yes, ma'am, what you're referring to is the write-off structure, where because of the tax rate or something else, well, just the write-off structure where Americans in particular can write off their taxes against certain expenses or certain gifts. So that's a problem. And you are being consistent with the head of Binney, who's the head of Oxfam, who worries that U.S. corporate taxes, if people go to Ireland and these sorts of places, then they won't have a reason to write off the taxes and then charities like Oxfam and the Red Cross won't get the charitable dollars that they expected and so on. But it's a corrupt system. If the Bahamas had done what was advised in 2000, which is to sign a double taxation agreement, in fact, to do a friendship treaty with America, to say we've been friends for 240 years before your inception. We have veterans that have served and volunteered in your First World War, your Second World War, the Vietnam War, the Iraq wars, and so on. All right. We hold a military base and a submarine signaling station in the Bahamas, which are strategic nodes to the American system. We are the third border of the United States. You borrow 80%, the United States, of global savings. We process those global savings. Listen, 80% now of global savings they borrow. We process that. And when the OECD says you have money sloshing around in the Bahamas, they show their ignorance. Because in fact, 80% of the monies that come through the Bahamas are reinvested in the United States, lending them money, paying for their bloated mortgages, paying for their bloated administration, and so on, investing in U.S. corporations and that sort of thing. So we're actually funding U.S. debt and deficits to the world, all right? U.S. debt to the world. So, and U.S. deficits within their structure. So in point of fact, these corporate taxes, when they're done, because they're not going to be universal, there's no way the United States can get China to do this. If you had a double taxation agreement, you have something called the alternative minimum tax. And this is what Paul Morse and others who believe in corporate taxation are talking about. Mm-hmm. And that is, if the U.S. current rate is, I think, 21.4 or 21.6 or something like that. So if the U.S. rate was that, and we were charging 5%, what you would do is you'd negotiate with the United States within the conditions of the treaty and say 2.5% of what we raise goes to the aid that you were giving us. We'll discount the aid. So things like drug interdiction and, human trafficking and all these things where we participate with each other. We'll offset your generosity to us by that rate of tax. Mm-hmm. So it's beneficial to the United States, but you have a high enough rate, what is called the marginal rate of aversion. You have a high enough rate that people don't just go, oh, I'm going to the Bahamas. They have to think, okay, if I go to the Bahamas, I have to pay 5%, but then I have to, set up an office and structure and yada, yada, buy a building, all these sorts of things. So it is not a cascade into the Bahamas.
Right.
So that's what you want to do with an alternative minimum tax. What she's doing, Janet Yellen, is proposing to eliminate even that consideration and force countries like the Bahamas to raise their taxes. Now, here's what we'll end up doing. Because we don't have a financial zone, free trade zone, when those corporate taxes come down, Bahamian companies that do no business, the young lady who is doing the hair thing on Carmichael Road, mm-hmm. she may find herself having to pay these high corporate taxes.
Wow. I want you to stick a pin in that, Professor Morris, because we are 6 minutes beyond the time and we're supposed to take our last break. So let's take this break and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk specifically about that, about how this is going to impact all businesses in the Bahamas. And we're going to look at a couple of comments because people are asking, okay, so how do we fix this? All of that is on the other side of the break. Stay with us. This is GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM.
hats off. Looking like I walked out of catalog. Everybody wanna know where I got it from. Catwalk, 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 boutique, where we make fashion statements. Catwalk, boutique, where we make fashion statements.
For the latest styles on women's clothing and accessories, visit Catwalk Boutique on Robertson Road East at the Helron Plaza. At Catwalk Boutique, we make fashion statements.
Horton's Car Rental and Auto Sales, Robinson Road and 5th Street, The Grove, is your premium choice for affordable transportation. We have reliable cars at unbelievable prices. Ask about our daily rates, starting at $50, and our weekly rates, starting as low as $280. Call us at 437-4017 or 676-3977. Horton's Car Rental, your premium choice for affordable transportation.
The freshest wave of glory to hit the Bahamas. This is the all-new Glory 93.9 FM, where God is glorified and the people of God edified.
Looking for an extraordinary junior high school with caring, qualified staff and affordable tuition? Then come visit us at Elite School of Excellence, an affiliate of First Step Academy. ABECA-focused and Ministry of Education approved, we foster discipline, integrity, and wisdom while molding our students for success. Call us at 341-8846 or stop by First Step Academy Schools on Fire Trail and Soldy Roads for more information.
Executive Printers is your one-stop shop for all your branding and customization needs. Letterheads, envelopes, business cards, invoices, share and gift certificates, rubber stamps, vouchers, funeral programs, brochures, flyers, banners, and promotional items like mugs, water bottles, mouse pads, and key rings, all with personable service and great quality. No project is too small or too large. For great turnaround and competitive pricing, make an executive decision. Call us at 393-5011.
Understanding your microbiome, also known as your gut ecosystem, can change everything you thought you knew about nutrition, digestion, immunity, and metabolism. Keeping your gut ecosystem healthy and balanced is essential. Ultimate Microbiome by Longevity was specifically formulated to optimize this ecosystem. It provides the advanced support your gut needs through prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic supplementation. Our unique blend of probiotics includes Lactobacillus and Plantarum, healthy bacteria that can help prevent harmful bacteria from taking over your gut. Increasing your gut's population of beneficial bacteria creates a more balanced gut microbiome, which has been shown to aid in weight loss, skin health, sleep, mood, and may even help with seasonal allergies. Ultimate Microbiome also promotes the production of postbiotics. Postbiotics are key to help regulate your gastrointestinal health. To enhance digestion, Digizyme Multi-Enzyme Complex, a blend of 5 specific enzymes, has been added to Ultimate Microbiome. It can help break down food so your body can better absorb nutrients. Plus, we've added our proprietary I-26 hyperimmune egg powder to aid in the elimination of disease-causing gut bacteria and help your body balance its immune response. Ultimate Microbiome, the scientific, proprietary, and holistic approach to gut health that helps optimize your body's entire gut ecosystem. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
And we are back. Welcome back to GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. I'm your host, Michelle Malcolm. My guest today is Professor Dr. Gilbert Morris. We're talking about all of this narrative now from, the powerhouses around the world, Europe and United States specifically, talking about the implementation or the suggested implementation of a global minimum corporate tax. And this show today is, what does that mean for us here in the Bahamas? How is that going to impact all of us? How will that impact the business community in the Bahamas? Because this is not something that will, if implemented, only affect big foreign businesses, big, corporations. And Dr. Morris, I want you to break that down for people to understand that all businesses will be impacted by this, because this is not just about, the big foreign company, so I have nothing to worry about.
Yes, just like all banks and bank rules were affected by the rules that come down from the OECD.
Mm-hmm.
So people end up asking ridiculous questions of, 18-year-olds or, so we need 3 months of your bank. The person says, but, I'm 17. I never had a bank account. I mean, these kinds of things. And some of those things may have been corrected, but they never should have happened. And they indicate that we've received rules rather than created rules. Right. We've received rules and instructions, just as we did with this legislation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no doubt that the forces are arrayed against us. The Patriot Act has dissipated, but Title III of the Patriot Act still remains valid, in which the Secretary of the U.S. Treasury can cut off any country from the U.S. financial system,
Mm-hmm.
as it did with Belize. All right. As it did with Belize. So my point is, nobody's saying it's not difficult. What we're saying is we don't care that it's difficult, that we stand when you come in the room. We just knew you yesterday as the fellow from True the Corner. Now we stand when you come in the room. We give you that respect. We let you ride around in a nice car, all right? And you get to fly first class, probably for the first time in your life, all right? We don't begrudge you that. We honor that. Right. I had a situation one time in 2000 where a minister of government, there were no hotel rooms left for a big conference in Florida. I had a suite. I moved out of my suite so he could have the suite, because that's what you do for your country. All right. Now, the question is, with all the perks and the benefits that we and privileges that we give them, are they doing the kind of vision-breaking thinking and innovation that's necessary to move the Bahamas ahead and protect Bahamian people? Obviously, in respect of the financial services crisis and the OECD, we did not. What we did mostly was capitulate and pass unconstitutional laws that put undue pressure on ordinary Bahamians, when in fact those Bahamians do not do business with. Listen, if you do international transactions, you have to meet certain criteria. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If you are an IBC or an international business company, or you're in financial services in the Bahamas, so that we call it outfacing to the world, you have to follow those regulations. But the best way to do that is within the context of a financial center zone, a free trade zone. If you are an ordinary Bahamian selling Benny cake to other Bahamians and so on, and you happen to have a business license because you want to be compliant,
Mm-hmm.
these rules should not affect you. There should be a carve out, and this Andrew Allen always speaks about this on the corporate, on the tax side, where he talks about billionaires owning keys in the Bahamas that don't pay taxes.
Right.
And he actually provided a list at one point in a chat that frightened the living daylights out of everybody, because nobody touched it. It was like, when Jesus wrote on the ground, and then the disciples just looked and go, oh my God, because he didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
He just wrote and then walked away.
Mm-hmm.
And people do the same thing, did the same thing when Andrew Allen provided that list, because these are people that they want to get invited to their Christmas parties and things like that. And they seem to care more about that than regulating these people. So the people in the Bahamas who are hungry, the children who have been out of school or misserved in our education system, the resources necessary for them are in the pockets of these people whom we refuse to tax and impose our tax laws upon. But as soon as a Bahamian doesn't produce some silly piece of paper that someone in France said is necessary for him to open a bank account, he is somehow mistreated in his own country and loses a sense that his constitutional rights are the driving vector for the way he's treated in his own country and his money-related habits.
I want to read a couple of comments from Facebook viewers.
Yes.
Adrian says, Mr. Morris, here in Europe, the banks are begging to get a mortgage at 9% in the Bahamas. I know people paying almost 10%. Is there any future is there any future of the country with the same politics?
Well, no, there isn't, because what's really happening, it's like insurance rates. For years, I can't remember who did the study, but we have been paying rates that are averaged across the entire global sphere, the risk sphere of certain insurance companies, right? Not the rate that's relative to the risk propositions that are true on the landscape in the Bahamas. We are financing We are, I'll give you an example. In Turks and Caicos, a country with 34,000 people, 14,000 actual Turks and Caicos Islanders. So Turks and Caicos Islanders are outnumbered in the country, right, by expatriates and migrants. A company, I won't name which company it is, that company is in Canada in an area, a zone with 350,000 people. So essentially the population of the Bahamas. In Canada, after tax, as Leon Williams would say, the EBITDA, right, after tax, those countries, that company netted $15 million from 350,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
In Turks and Caicos with 34,000 people, they netted $11.5 million. Now, people will say, well, there's economies of scale and the place is small, so things are more expensive and all that kind of thing. No. We don't have the regulatory fortitude, skill, and attention, because we spend so much time on tribalism, to examine these companies. UOB, the students at UOB should be involved, every single one of them, as learning the law, learning the sociology of the Bahamas, the history of the Bahamas, the economics of the Bahamas, by being the research centers for our regulatory agencies. So when they graduate, they come out of school with a deep, flourishing knowledge. These are your future lawyers, judges, these sorts of people, mm-hmm. ministers of government. So they come out of school with a deep, flourishing knowledge, and they have the pride of saying, I was involved in the review of mortgage rates for the Bahamas, and we were able to determine that the rates were unfair and that the true carrying rate for the Bahamas is about 6%. Right? But you cannot just say that. And what better way to build a reputation of your educational institution than by having your students participate in that? The same thing I said with the emergency powers. I wrote and said the emergency powers were drawn wrongly. Nobody's accusing the Prime Minister of being nefarious or anything. You can make a mistake. They are drawn wrongly for our Constitution, incorrectly for our Constitution. I advised setting up 100 law students at UOB, setting up the ombudsman system, which is in the Bahamas Constitution, which means the ombudsman is someone that Bahamians can write to mm-hmm. if they feel the laws are prejudiced against them. And the ombudsman can overrule the competent authority. That's his constitutional power. But instead of just doing that, let young Bahamians participate in that. Imagine 10 years from now, if you had 100 Bahamian law students who cut their teeth on understanding the Constitution by understanding the Article 29 emergency powers in relation to the rights and privileges of ordinary Bahamians. Those people, every one of them would have a pride that you can't imagine at the moment. I said the same thing in March when the large research institutes, when the big microbiologists and organic chemists around the world, the virologists, were saying we want nothing to do with this vaccine idea because in their experience, there's no way you could develop a vaccine in a year. Mm-hmm. That opened up an opportunity, and I wrote to everyone that would listen, let's send Bahamian microbiologists, Bahamian immunologists, Bahamian young physicians with a high degree of chemistry and physics and microbiology. Let's send them to these centers. If we had sent 7 people in March of 2020 to these centers, one, we would have the pride of those people being part of the new superstar young scientists all over the world that worked on these vaccines. Number 2, we would have participated in the trials, such as Johnson & Johnson's international trials for the vaccines. Number 3, we would have all the vaccines we need. And if we had all the vaccines we needed right now, if vaccines is your policy, it means we could be open for business fully.
Well, there is a saying, where there is no vision, the people perish. And I do believe that a part of the challenge that we have faced successive administrations is just a lack of visionary leadership. Either that or the fear to stand on the visionary leaders, the vision that they supposedly have, and make decisions that benefit the people more so than, as you so eloquently put it, stop kowtowing. Because quite frankly, the goalpost keeps moving.
It keeps moving.
And you will never be able to meet all of the demands because the demands keep changing.
And the reason is because they're not trying to get you to comply. They're trying to eliminate you. But we keep thinking, oh, we've complied. Then we go for the pat on the head. And this, I said this in Bermuda when I gave the Hamilton lecture. I said this in Bermuda that Eric Crutchley from Late of Cayman National Bank in 2002, we did a conference here in Nassau calling for an organization of international financial centers to bundle together and appoint a general secretariat and a research center and then fight as a unified front against these issues. Nothing happened, right? The Bahamas didn't even have a representative at that conference. And so the problem is across the board. Our governments have built a system. They only know how to run that system. And every time young people, listen to me, every time you make a proposal that either checks somebody in that system or threatens somebody in that system,
they attack you,
or just introduces you to that system as a person whom they do not know and whose coordinates and interests and alignments they do not understand, that's why your proposal fails. That's why you don't get answers. Delay is corruption. Wherever you get delay, that is corruption, because it opens the avenue for you to become desperate and for you to express more about your confidential commercial objectives, or for you to offer someone an emolument to move your process forward. That's not picking on any particular government. It is the system that we've created, and it runs all the way down from top to bottom in the society. And it has left Bahamians crying every day, is in Obama and Gilead, rather than referring to the Bahamas according to its potential as the new Jerusalem, the shining city on a hill.
My God. All right, let me read a couple more of your comments from here on Facebook. Rose says, good morning, Michelle. Boy, you can't keep a good woman down. It's good to hear you again. And to your guest, Dr. Morris, we need men like him in Parliament to show, her words, them Negroes, how to run this country. Keep up the good work, Michelle. All right, thank you so much. We have another comment, this one from Adrian again. It says, Dr. Morris, you could show us how to turn sand into gold. The politicians in the Bahamas would sell the sand and say, let someone else do it. Will there ever be a change in the Bahamas?
The key thing I want to say, and what Adrian says is, sadly, this is how it looks to the average Bahamian. If you think about, someone asked me about this, I don't try to help parties win government. I don't do that. If a Bahamian asks me, they say I'm a member of parliament or I'm leader of a party or something, can you explain something to me? I'll do that. Right, which I do for hundreds of Bahamians. Every year, I have about 40 Bahamian students who write and say, "Can you help me?" And so, yes, I do that.
Right.
But when it comes to the politics of this country and the way things are arranged, there is a growing sense in Bahamians that we can't believe anything. We had Mr. Pindling for 2 decades and a half. Then we had Mr. Ingram for a period. Then a flip-flop has happened. That's an indication that Bahamians don't believe any politician. They don't. And I know the point some people are going to make. Well, in the Bahamas, we vote against people, not for people. The person who wins by default. They don't actually have a mandate. They have a negative mandate. All right. And that may be true, but that's true with diminishing returns. Meaning that each time the flip-flop happens, there are people in the equation, Bahamians, who do not make their voices heard because they can't be bothered to be part of what they see now as a farce. You have a renaissance in young Bahamians. Never have you had so many beautiful, smart, articulate, internationally exposed, well-qualified, talented Bahamians, or those who didn't get to go abroad, who have had serial entrepreneurship and have worked in various ways to build small companies and small businesses and so on. So you have this unique constituency of talented, brilliant young people. These people should be the focus of new policies. And that doesn't mean writing discriminatory rules that give them a public benefit based on age categories. It means engaging them. So when we had the Tech Hub meeting in Freeport, you had the people who can't even open their phone doing all the talking. The talented people who can hack your phone were sitting in the audience. If we're going to do something like a Tech Hub and we're going to be serious, find a building anywhere in the Bahamas, wire it up the wazoo, put food there and everything like that, and say, we have 5 $1 million prizes for the person who can hack whatever or build whatever system, and we give you the land registry as a contract to build a digital land registry or digital company registry or digital birth records registry or health registry on blockchain. That's what you get. You don't just go there and say, we want to do a tech hub and it'll be nice for the Bahamas and it's important and we want people to be involved because, this is our great Bahamas and our Bahama land and all this kind of thing. Nobody wants to hear evangelical gibberish. What we want, when a government speaks, things should change, right? Things should change.
Well, Professor, I think one of the reasons why we're not saying that, I think C. Allen Johnson put it this way: people governing on sound bites.
Yes.
Saying stuff because it sounds good, it will make a good sound bite on the news.
Right.
Catch somebody's attention.
Right.
But very little effort being put into any kind of realistic plan.
Right.
To bring that sound bite to pass.
Absolutely. Listen, my son wanted to. My father taught me to drive very illegally when I was 11 years old. Right. But, this is the back roads of 8 Mile Rock and so on. Ain't nobody was there. The one policeman, you give him some potato bread and that was it, which is corruption, but I understand. So my son, 16, says to me, Pops, you promised me. He wanted to drive at 11 when he heard the story.
Mm-hmm.
I said, no, that's not right. The law, When you're 16, daddy will get you a car. This is what you say to an 11-year-old, right? Now, of course, I forgot that.
But he sure didn't.
But he's 16. So when you're the daddy, your word has to come true. So I'm sitting there going, okay, how can I make this true? How can I organize this? Because he isn't ready. I don't think he's responsible enough yet to drive. All right. And so I enrolled him in a racing club. So I say, listen, you need some more tech. So I enrolled him in a racing club.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets to drive. He just doesn't get, so daddy can say, my word did not return to me void.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Governments have to think like that. We promised, we went to schools when we were campaigning, told these young people they were the future of the Bahamas and so on. Okay, the young fella has come up with something that's quite inconvenient, and I don't know how. You have to come up with something.
No, but instead our leaders have said, well, plenty of things are said on the campaign trail, but that don't mean.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, we have a caller on the line.
Right.
Caller, welcome to GPS.
Good morning, Michelle. Good morning, Dr. Mars. How you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Excellent to listen to your wise words this morning. I really wanted to ask you, all the points that you've listed off thus far that have proven to be to our detriment here in this thriving country. Would you agree with me when I say that a lot of it has to do with our educational system? Because I heard you talking about the younger folks and the entrepreneurs striving to get their business off the ground and this and that. But would you agree with me that it really stems from our educational system? And what do you think about our educational system per se?
Yes.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you very much. I'm going to say that the education system is really a reflection of a larger national system of routine failures and excuses.
Oh, man.
Right? So the education system doesn't stand out from our immigration programs, right, which we seem not to be able to control, or the imposition on us of unconstitutional rules, which we absorb and then say we talk as if the Constitution is an inconvenience to capitulation, right? So we want to do what somebody else says because we say they have power over us. And we look at the Constitution and go, why do we have to have this Constitution? My God, I want to get this thing done for these people who are not Bahamian and to whom I did not take an oath, right? So this is a problem. On the education system in particular, however, I reject absolutely and abjectly as bilious and bouncing nonsense that the D grade reflects any proper standard that any country should tout. And anyone who touts this is doing a disservice to our children. Now, here's what they've come up with. This is the new excuse or the running excuse. Well, you see, the D grade is the Bahamas standard, and within the Bahamas, it's a pass. So when you look at it like that, actually, the D grade means most of our children are passing because it's relative to the Bahamas. All right. That is dreamy nonsense. The real test of an education system, because it presumes that an education system is tethered only within its own jurisdictional sphere, and that our young people are not competing with people in the outside world. The real test of an education system is if you put an Estonian, a Singaporean, a Japanese, a child from Finland, and a child from Nigeria, and a Bahamian in a room, a 15-year-old, and they do math, science, chemistry, and physics. Is the Bahamian child going to come out alive?
Well, here's the thing, and we have a call on the line, and call, I'm coming to you right now. Here's the thing, because that doesn't only apply to education, but we as Bahamians seem to have this notion that the world will come down to our standard.
Right.
I see the same thing in pageantry.
Right.
And, I often say, she ain't competing. When we're looking for a queen, we're looking for somebody who can compete internationally, because she ain't only competing amongst herself.
That's right.
So from the local level,
that's right.
We're looking for the person who is closest to be able to compete internationally.
The international standard.
Because she got to come up to their standard. They ain't coming down to us.
And so what we do is, in any system, there are what are called outliers, or in genetics, it's called the runaway gene.
Right.
Someone who has a set of characteristics which are not consistent with the system itself. So when you find those brilliant young people like a Carlos Mackey or a Morgan Adderley or a Peter Blair, or all these brilliant young people, they say, see, the system produces these excellent people, but that's not true. Right? Those people are outliers who would have survived in any system whatsoever. The real test of a system is its broad success. Its broad success, and whether or not you can innovate at the margins to bring people up who are subsystemic and bring them into the coordinates of the system and see to their success. And if we're not thinking like that, if we're busy defending the D grade, and we fail to understand that our young people, and we see it while the business community tells you every day, hey, we have people who can't read and write, but they've graduated. We have members of parliament, it seems, who can't count and have anatomical distinctions about how we refer to leadership and so on, that are very curious indeed.
Okay, we have a caller that's been waiting a little while on the line. Caller, thank you so much for hanging on, and welcome to GPS. Hi, caller.
Hello.
Hello, caller. Yes, we're listening.
Yes, to your guests, my focus on the taxing cases, right? So I have a good idea of how things are in the taxing cases for all the classes there, right? But I call you to say this, right? In the Bahamas, right? We've been many of us been advocating for the introduction of income tax, so that's outside of this global income tax, and that in the United States, right, where they have the senators having a hearing now on rich paying their fair share of taxes. Right. You see, and it's not about this global tax thing. It's about about legislation to close the loopholes on people who are avoiding taxes. You see.
Yes.
As well as You know, we talk about sort of segments in society that can prosper. Like we're a society with many doctors, right?
Yes.
But and we have so many doctors. We have the young doctors that they can't get in the system because of competition, right? But that still doesn't fix our problems of access to healthcare for those that don't have.
Right.
You see, we have a system where we have no social housing. We believe that social housing is ownership of houses.
Right.
You know, and places like the UK where there's 17% of all housing is social housing, that's low rental housing.
Right.
You see, not housing ownership. So you know, and I remember when Margaret Thatcher came to power, what she did with the social housing. She said, "Oh, we're gonna sell them to these people." You know what these people did? They turned on and sold these houses. They flipped these houses, and that drove up the cost of
the council housing program. Yes.
Right. So we don't have to write a book. The book is already there for all of our social issues and the like. We just have to follow this book and, you know, not say we don't need to think outside the book. We need to get in the book. That's our problem.
All right. Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. This argument has gone back and forth about income tax for ages for the Bahamas. Here's my point.
Mm-hmm.
Economists don't care about any kind of tax system. What they care about is what you do before you adopt a tax. If we can't collect the taxes on the books now, every time you increase or introduce a new tax, you're just taxing the same people to death. Because the problem is you can't manage and enforce a proper tax system. So before that was my opposition to VAT. Before you impose a new tax, what Andrew Allen talks about this is, as I say again, about people in the family islands who don't, wealthy people living in our country who don't pay their fair share of taxes. And my point is, before you implement a new tax, figure out why you're not collecting the taxes you're not collecting. Is it a human resource problem? Is it a technology problem? If you spend the money on the human resources or the technology, will that be sufficient to offset the tax that is owed to you?
Right.
Answer those questions first before you develop. And then you have to get into the research about justifying the alternative tax system.
Okay. We have another call on the line. Caller, welcome to GPS.
Yes, good morning, Ms. Malcolm, and good morning to Mr. Gilbert Morris.
Good morning, my brother. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. You know, thanks for the disclosures. You know, you always open my mind further. And so I just have two quick questions. I'll make a statement and I'll just hang up and let you comment. Firstly, something you said that I read in the Great Reset, and I was very impressed with it, and it's so correct. And it's about, I call it the robocalypse, right?
Yeah.
The automation of the, you know, after this COVID construct, right?
Right.
And so I'm looking at, I don't see us doing, I don't see us promoting robotics and technological advances as what is to come. So we can be braced for this, because I'm looking at, I saw some documentary in Dubai, and I look at the automations in the airport, and I was taken aback when you said there was a hotel with no staff, right?
Right.
And so I was like, that's what I really saw, and I was like, I'm afraid. And so I know what the agenda is eventually behind robotics and transhumanism. I don't want to frighten the sheep, but I also wanted you to comment on the fact that I noticed that the stock markets, I was listening to The Economist because I'm trying to, you know, I deal with science, but, you know, I noticed that stock markets are rising mostly all over the world. Yes. And they was talking good about Zimbabwe. So he was saying this is really an indication of the debt of the dollar.
Right.
And I'm noticing as the economy is now in a poor state, how is it that these stock markets are rising? It makes me feel like there's some real form of acquisitions and globalization. Now, let's hang up and listen, sir.
All right. Thank you so much for calling.
When you have a crisis such as this, so the crisis in 2008 was both a financial and an economic crisis, two different things, right? A financial crisis are the institutions that are involved in finance. An economic crisis is a broad crisis across the country, right? And across the world. So 2008 represented that. COVID is three: a public health crisis, a financial crisis, and an economic crisis, right? When that happens, people default to certainty. But when they default to certainty, they also chase value. And how that works is that you have a lot of consolidations and you have a lot of, purchasing of companies and so on. That happens within the context of stock exchanges. And because of those consolidations, or let's say in Zimbabwe, they've resisted foreign companies that would come in and develop an industry or take an industry over and make it more efficient. But they've been resisting that on nationalist grounds. When the pandemic hits, the crisis is so deep, they just open the floodgates and let people in. Then people want to cash in on that opportunity. So that's why you're seeing the frothiness. There are other underlying issues, but that's one of the major reasons for the frothiness in stock exchanges. On robotics, it was you'll remember, in February of 2020, a video was released that actually went viral, where I was saying there was no reason for the Bahamas to shut down and that we should in fact develop COVID-free trust zones. And that's what Dubai has done. Dubai has turned the country into an iPad of public health. They can monitor everything, track everything. But this goes back to my point about identifying those 100 students at UOB, because you can't just get into automation and robotics based on what the scientists or the technologists say. You have to think about the constitutional implications, because robotics and animation rest within an economic and legal construct, and it has to fit within the constitutional proprieties that are laid out in the Bahamas Constitution. So that is coming. Robotics and automation is going to have an impact on us. The world that we thought was before, and I heard two public officials say that we're going to wait and see what's going to happen in the United States and the Bahamas will be all right. That is just abject nonsense. I heard another person say 3 times that the reserves are up equal to or better than 2019. But how could that be when you've lost 77% of domestic income, national income, and 44% of government revenue?
Well, I can tell you how. That's because we're in Wonderland.
Yes, absolutely.
We've fallen down the rabbit hole and we are in Wonderland. I have to take a quick commercial break, Professor. We got to pay our bills. We got to get this last break in for our sponsors. And then on the other side of the break, we're going to wrap this thing up. Stay with us. This is GPS. Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. My guest today is the one and only Dr. Gilbert Morris. Caller, you can wait till I take a break to call? Okay, we're going to get to you right after the break, caller. Stay with us.
Ocean blue is the best in seafood, fresh out the water and affordable too, We got fish, conch, lobster, shrimp, everything you want, Ocean Blue got it. Ocean Blue, friendly and clean, best service you ever seen. Ocean Blue is the best in seafood, fresh out the water and affordable too, Ocean Blue Seafood, we are here for you. Ocean Blue Seafood, no one else will do. Ocean Blue Seafood, located on Burnett Road. Contact us at 393-2160.
Escape from the city life to Bacon Air Beach Resort in Piratesville, Mayaguana. Relax in one of 16 air-conditioned rooms just steps away from the ocean. Enjoy scrumptious dishes in our waterfront dining room. Sip on a tropical cocktail, or if you must, stay connected with wireless internet. Nestled on one of the most beautiful beaches in the Bahamas, Bacon Air Beach Resort offers a unique vacation experience. For reservations, call 339-3726 or 463-0182.
At the Shirley Street Plaza, you'll find Le Petit Gourmet, a small cafe that's big on flavor. Handcrafted delights made with love will not only please your palate, but feed your soul. Call us at 394-1251. 8 to 12 minutes is all it takes for a burglar to rob your home or business. Security Systems International provides professional and affordable solutions for both. Call 396-5000 for your customized quote. Gwen's Alterations provides professional services for all your tailoring needs, including face masks to keep you safe and in style. A stitch in time saves 9. So call us today at 393-6227.
For all your building needs, it's Carib Construction and Project Management on Gladstone Road. We build it all. Schools, homes, hotels, and more, including structures requiring a Phase 3 electrical contractor. We also provide project management services. The first step towards your dream building begins at Carib Construction and Project Management. Call us at 376-1556 or 341-4466.
Your body's immune system is under constant pressure from things like stress, lack of exercise, and toxins in the environment. It's crucial to be proactive and support your immune system with the nutrients it needs to function effectively. But it's often hard to get these nutrients from food alone. Introducing fast-acting Zinc Plus Immune Support by Longevity. Unlike zinc-only supplements, Zinc Plus Immune Support builds on the proven power of zinc and adds complementary nutrients to give your immune system extra support. Vitamin D helps balance the effects of zinc, while our proprietary blend of natural fruit and root extracts provides the extra help your immune system needs to work against daily stressors. And we've included Longevity's exclusive plant-derived minerals to give your body the minerals it needs, but can't get from food alone. And because Zinc Plus Immune Support is delivered in a great-tasting, sugar-free, berry-flavored lozenge, it encourages quicker absorption of all these nutrients into your body. Zinc Plus Immune Support. Zinc plus the extra support your body needs to promote a healthy immune system. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Okay, we are back. Welcome back to GPS, Global Paradigm Shift on Glory 93.9 FM. I'm your host, Michelle Malcolm. Is something happening on Facebook? Because I'm not seeing myself on the stream. We're good? Okay, it's coming back up. Okay, but we do have a radio audience as well, so we can't just ignore you guys there in Radio Land. So as we wait for the stream to come back up on our Facebook feed, we are talking today to Professor Gilbert Morris, and okay, I see what's happening. It's sort of added Professor Morris, just not the camera that I'm on. He's up. Okay, all right. He has a handsome face, so we can look at him while I'm talking. So we have Professor Gilbert Morris as our guest in the studio today, and we're talking about the global minimum corporate tax that is now being touted by members of the EU and the United States, and how is this going to impact us here in the Bahamas? I want to, let me see, is this thing, okay, we're having some real challenges with the feed here. Let me see something. Okay, there we go. All right, so I want to go to a couple of the comments here on Facebook. Sherry's a fan. Sherry Sanoun, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, says, Michelle, this is a great show, and Dr. Morris is so on point. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry, for tuning in. Yes. Bertha says, very informative show. That's what we aim to do here, bring you the information that is needed for us to advance our nation. Okay, so we're talking, we only have, 10 minutes left. Where did the time go, Professor Morris? Jeez. We have 10 minutes left in the show. So let's talk about solutions now. I mean, you brought us some brilliant ideas about what needs to happen as it relates to, embracing the brilliant minds at the university, for instance, and not just for our leaders not to act like because they have been appointed or elected to these positions that all of a sudden they're an expert in everything, but open the floor to actually hear from the experts.
One of the things that troubles me, particularly I've always been in contact with large numbers of young Bahamians who, starting in 2010 when I came on Facebook, and I was told that I use Facebook completely wrong because I don't show pictures of my cat backflipping. I write actual articles and so on. But it has turned out that there's a vast following across the world, really, but certainly in the Bahamas, of young students using this as templates for their essays. And at any given time, I've got 40 young happen to know that they have skills and brilliance and interest and curiosity, and they're capable, and they're respectful and charming and graceful and so on. And so I love this, all across, Turks and Caicos students, Jamaican students, Barbadian students, and so on, a huge contingent from Nigeria, I mean, and these young people have a yearning in them, and they are right to have that yearning. They do studies and they look
suggested legislation, and I don't know if legislation is the right word,
yeah,
but this direction that
yes.
the rest of the world is pushing towards.
Throw away your manifestos, throw them away, and hold community conferences and let Bahamians come in and tell you what kind of Bahamas they want. And you will find that the model of the Bahamas, the vision for the Bahamas, is walking around on the streets, uncared for, unattended in the minds of our brilliant young people. That's one. Number two, do not repeat what was done when we opened Parliament on a holiday eve and enacted 11 pieces of unconstitutional legislation, followed by a ream of unconstitutional legislation over the last 15 to 18 years. Do not do that. Have some consideration that we ought to establish, Lester Cox talks about city government all the time, and he's absolutely right. It so happens that city government and a financial center free trade zone, right, they blend together rather beautifully. They coordinate well together. This means that when these international rules occur, most of the people in this free trade zone would be people from their countries, their foreign banks that are in the Bahamas. So those rules would apply to them, but not to Granny and Eleuthera and Grand Bahama. All right? We would have our own set of internal rules that reflect our culture and that Bahamians are amenable to because they can understand and rationalize and make sense of why the rules emerge and how they function. Develop fintech and domestic banking so that we can get out of these Canadian banks and develop fintech and domestic banking and support Bahamians who want to get into banking. One of the things we do is we look at Bahamians with a suspicious eye when they want to borrow money for entrepreneurship. And every time they talk about giving Bahamians money, they say a large number will fail. Well, if you have D grades running through the country and you have politicians who can't spell and don't know which parts of the body apply to metaphors, all right, why do you think the Bahamians would be any? We allow politicians to make mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. Horrible mistake that costs money and brings hardship to Bahamians. Why can't Bahamians who are entrepreneurs make mistakes and we still embrace them? All right. So let's develop an investment model where we expect people to fail. And when they fail, we want them to fail well and with knowledge. And we want to have a system to encourage them. And we want them to be responsible within the system. These are not giveaways. It should be rigorous and difficult. Their colleagues should judge them and analyze their work and that kind of thing. There should be a prudent method and so on. But let the child who's laying in its bed right now and thinks to itself, I want to change my life. I'm going to go out and do something to hire my friends and hire other Bahamians and build on a vision that I have. Let there be an avenue where that child can arrive at success, all right, with our care, our instruction, with discipline, with prudence, and so on. You know, there's a song going around the world, which was came from South Africa. It's called Jerusalem. And the song says, U Londoloze, U Hambe Nami, Gi Gangishi Ilana, which means, take me to Jerusalem. I am not from here, right? Don't leave me here. Then Jerusalem, the new Jerusalem, the new place where, the place of my dreams, so to speak. That song became an anthem all over the world with more than 2 or 3 billion downloads. Mm-hmm. Everybody's doing the dance all over the world, priests, the Pope, everybody, everywhere across the world. That song was made by some young people in a backyard in South Africa. Mm-hmm. But it expresses the reason it took hold in the world, and the song is sung in partly in English and then partly in Sesotho and Zulu. And the reason that it took such a hold in the world is expressed a yearning, a deep and flourishing yearning that can't we for once have a government that sees the sensible, prudent thing and does it? Can we not have that? We are suffering, and yet we believe in this new Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Don't leave me here in this world that is organized in this way, where I'm lied to constantly, and people who've been sleeping in their cars suddenly believe that they are emperors once they're elected to our parliaments and walk around and speak to us with a disdain. This is one of the things I loved about Mia Mottley and the Prime Minister of Singapore. During this COVID period, not once did they attack or insult their population. It was always thoughtful and generous. People were suffering and so on. And in the Bahamas, where people have been living in COVID conditions for 40 years, it seems ridiculous to me that we find ourselves in a position where we do not address the suffering people of this country and say, at long last, we are going to use this moment to correct the education situation. We're going to borrow money, not just to move around musical chairs of financial obligations, but we're actually going to borrow money to reposition the Bahamas for your prosperity and your benefit, such as the Constitution imagined.
Professor Morris, exactly 1 p.m. Oh, my goodness. What a powerful statement to end with. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be in. Congratulations. You are still the DNN of media in the Bahamas.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's our time, guys. Oh, man, this has been incredible. We have to have you back soon. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Thank you.
Well, tomorrow's Wednesday, so you know what that means. It's going to be a Wellness Wednesday show. So we invite you to tune in tomorrow to learn how to optimize your health. Optimize. Is that a word?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. I'm Michelle Malcolm. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy your afternoon, everybody.